Never ignore your gut feeling when something doesn't add up. My name is Derek, and 6 months ago I thought I had the perfect marriage. Jessica and I had been together for 8 years, married for 5. We had a nice house in the suburbs, 2 dogs, and what I believed was a rock-solid relationship built on trust and honesty. Looking back now, I realize how blind I was to the warning signs that were right in front of my face the entire time. Jessica worked as a marketing manager at a tech company downtown. She was ambitious, driven, and always putting in extra hours to climb the corporate ladder. I admired that about her. I worked as an electrical engineer at a different company, and my schedule was pretty standard. 9 to 5, home by 6, weekends off. Our routines worked well together, or at least I thought they did. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this. Everything started changing around February of last year. Jessica got a promotion to senior marketing director. She was excited about it, and so was I. More money, more responsibility, more opportunities for her career. But with that promotion came longer hours, more business trips, and a new boss named Marcus who seemed to demand her attention constantly. At first, I didn't think much of it. New job, new responsibilities, it made sense that she would be busier. She started coming home later and later. 8 became 9, 9 became 10, and sometimes she wouldn't walk through the door until almost midnight. When I asked her about it, she always had the same answer. Big project, important client meeting, team dinner with Marcus and the executives. Every excuse sounded reasonable on its own, but when you add them all up over weeks and months, the picture started looking different. Her phone became like an extension of her hand. She took it everywhere. Bathroom, bedroom, even when she went to grab a glass of water from the kitchen. If I walked into a room while she was texting, she would quickly close whatever she was looking at and put the phone face down. When I asked who she was talking to, she would say it was work stuff or one of her girlfriends. Nothing important, she would tell me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes anymore. The intimacy between us started dying a slow death. We went from making love 3 or 4 times a week to maybe once every 2 weeks, and even then it felt forced and disconnected. She would turn away from me in bed, claiming she was too tired or stressed from work. On weekends, when we used to spend time together doing things we enjoyed, she would suddenly have to go into the office for a few hours. Those few hours would turn into the entire day. I tried talking to her about it multiple times. I told her I felt like we were drifting apart, that I missed spending time with her, that I was worried about us. She would apologize, promise to do better, say that once this big project was done things would go back to normal. But that big project never seemed to end. There was always something else, always another deadline, always another reason why she couldn't be present in our marriage. My friends started noticing changes too. My best friend Ryan asked me one night over beers if everything was okay at home. He said I seemed stressed and distant. I told him Jessica was just really busy with work, that we were going through a rough patch, but it would pass. He gave me this look, the kind of look that says he knows something but doesn't want to say it out loud. That look stayed with me for days. The real turning point came in early April. I was doing the usual monthly budget review, going through our credit card statements to make sure everything was in order. Jessica and I had always been transparent about finances. We had joint accounts, shared credit cards, no secrets about money. So when I was looking through the charges on our main credit card, something caught my attention that made my stomach drop. There were hotel charges. Multiple hotel charges. The Marriott downtown charged 3 separate times in March alone. Each charge was for a room, not just food or drinks from the hotel restaurant. Actual overnight room charges. And they were all on weekdays, during times when Jessica told me she was working late at the office or having dinner with clients. I sat there staring at the computer screen for what felt like an hour, trying to come up with any logical explanation. Maybe they were charges for clients visiting from out of town. Maybe the company used her card and would reimburse her later. Maybe there was a mistake in the billing system. I went through every possible scenario in my head, desperately searching for anything that would make this make sense without being what I feared it was. But deep down, somewhere in that place where you know the truth even when you don't want to admit it, I already knew. Those hotel charges were not mistakes. They were not for business purposes. They were evidence of something I had been trying to ignore for months, because facing it would mean my entire world was about to fall apart. I didn't confront her that night. I needed to be smart about this. If Jessica was cheating on me, which every fiber of my being was now screaming at me that she was, Then confronting her without solid proof would just give her the opportunity to come up with more lies and cover her tracks better. I needed to know the truth, the whole truth, and I needed evidence that couldn't be explained away or denied. The next morning, I called in sick to work. As soon as Jessica left for her job, I got in my car and drove to the Marriott downtown. I walked up to the front desk and asked to speak with a manager. When she came out, I explained my situation as calmly as I could manage. I told her my wife had charges on our credit card for rooms at this hotel, and I needed to verify if she had actually stayed there because I suspected fraud. The manager was sympathetic but cautious. She explained they couldn't give me detailed information about guests due to privacy policies, but she could confirm whether or not those charges corresponded with actual room stays. She asked me to wait while she looked up the information. Those 10 minutes felt like 10 hours. I stood there in that hotel lobby, watching people come and go, wondering how many of them were having affairs, how many of them were destroying their marriages behind closed doors. The manager came back with a printed statement and a look on her face that told me everything before she even opened her mouth. She confirmed that yes, those charges were legitimate room bookings. 3 different nights in March. She couldn't tell me who stayed in the rooms or provide security footage, but she didn't need to. The confirmation was enough to turn my suspicion into certainty. I thanked her and walked out of that hotel feeling like a completely different person than the one who walked in. The betrayal hit me in waves. First came the anger, hot and consuming, making my hands shake and my heart pound. Then came the sadness, a deep aching pain in my chest that made it hard to breathe. And finally came something else, something colder and more focused. Determination. If Jessica wanted to destroy our marriage, fine. But she wasn't going to get away with it clean. She wasn't going to paint me as the bad guy or walk away with half of everything I had worked for while playing the victim. I was going to handle this the right way, the smart way, and I was going to make sure she faced consequences for what she had done. My first stop was a lawyer's office. I found one who specialized in divorce cases, particularly ones involving infidelity. His name was Robert Chun, and he had great reviews online. I walked into his office that same afternoon and laid everything out. The late nights, the phone secrecy, the hotel charges, all of it. He listened carefully, taking notes, and when I finished he leaned back in his chair and gave it to me straight. He said I needed more evidence. Hotel charges were suspicious, but they weren't proof of an affair by themselves. Jessica could claim they were for business purposes, that clients stayed there, that she needed a quiet place to work on presentations. Without concrete evidence of her actually being with someone else in a romantic or sexual capacity, it would be her word against mine. And in a divorce, especially in our state which was no fault, it wouldn't necessarily impact the financial settlement much anyway. But Robert also explained that having solid proof would give me leverage. It would prevent Jessica from trying to claim I was the reason for the marriage failing. It would protect my reputation, especially if she tried to make me look bad to our friends and family. And if I could prove the affair started before we separated, it would strengthen my position in negotiating the divorce terms. He told me I needed to gather more evidence. He couldn't advise me to do anything illegal like hacking her phone or email, but he suggested documenting everything. Keeping a journal of when she came home late, where she said she was going, any inconsistencies in her stories. He also mentioned that many people in my situation hired private investigators, though he was careful to say that was my choice to make. I left his office with a clear plan forming in my mind. I wasn't going to hire a private investigator because, frankly, I couldn't afford one on top of the legal fees I was about to rack up. But I could do some investigating myself. I had access to our phone records through our wireless carrier. I had our credit card statements. And I had something else that I wasn't proud of, but desperate times called for desperate measures. That evening, I went online and researched phone monitoring apps. There were dozens of them, marketed toward parents who wanted to keep tabs on their kids. They could track GPS location, read text messages, see call logs, even record phone calls in some cases. The ethical implications of installing one on Jessica's phone without her knowledge weren't lost on me. Under normal circumstances, I would never violate someone's privacy like that. But these weren't normal circumstances. My wife was cheating on me, lying to my face every single day, and I needed to know the truth. The next morning, Jessica left her phone charging in the bedroom while she took a shower. My heart was racing as I picked it up and quickly installed the monitoring app. The whole process took less than 3 minutes. I hid the app icon in a folder with a bunch of other apps she never used, and by the time she came out of the bathroom with her towel wrapped around her, I was back downstairs making coffee like nothing had happened. The app started feeding me information immediately. I could see her location in real time on a map. I could read every text message she sent and received. I could see every call she made, how long it lasted, who it was with. And what I discovered over the next week made me physically sick. She was texting someone named Marcus constantly, hundreds of messages a day, and they weren't work messages. They were intimate, sexual, romantic messages that left no doubt about what was happening. Messages talking about the last time they were together, how much they missed each other, how they couldn't wait to see each other again. Messages planning their next hotel meetup. Messages that included photos I will never be able to unsee. Marcus was her boss, the one she had mentioned countless times as the demanding executive who needed her to work late hours. Every time she said she was staying at the office for a meeting with Marcus, she actually was with Marcus, just not in the way she led me to believe. They had been sleeping together since shortly after her promotion. For months of lies, for months of betrayal, for months of her coming home to our bed after being with him. The text messages revealed everything. How it started at a company conference in Las Vegas back in February. How they had sex in his hotel room after getting drunk at the conference party. How she felt guilty at first, but then convinced herself she deserved to be happy, that I was boring and didn't understand her ambitions like Marcus did. How they started meeting at hotels during lunch breaks and after work. How careful they had to be because Marcus was also married with 2 kids. Reading those messages broke something inside me. This wasn't just physical cheating. This was an emotional affair too. She had fallen for this guy. She was talking about leaving me, about building a future with Marcus once they both got divorced. She was actively planning the destruction of our marriage while pretending everything was fine to my face. I documented everything. I took screenshots of every text message. I downloaded the GPS location history showing her at hotels when she told me she was at the office. I printed out the credit card statements with the hotel charges highlighted. I created a folder on my laptop with hundreds of pages of evidence, organized by date, backed up to cloud storage, and a USB drive that I kept hidden in my car. For 2 weeks, I lived a double life. During the day, I went to work and acted normal around my colleagues. In the evening, I came home and pretended everything was fine with Jessica. I asked her about her day, listened to her lies about meetings and projects, and bit my tongue every single time she made up another story about working late. At night, after she fell asleep, I would go through the new messages and location data, watching in real time as my marriage disintegrated. The hardest part wasn't the anger or even the heartbreak. It was the acting. Sitting across from her at dinner, making small talk, pretending I didn't know she had been in a hotel room with Marcus just hours earlier. Kissing her goodbye in the morning, knowing she was going to see him. Listening to her complain about how stressed she was at work, when really she was stressed about juggling 2 relationships and keeping her lies straight. I met with Robert twice more during those 2 weeks. I showed him everything I had collected. The text messages, the location data, the credit card statements, all of it. He was impressed with how thorough I had been. He said this was more than enough evidence to prove the affair beyond any doubt. Now we just needed to plan the confrontation and the divorce process strategically. Robert advised me to get my finances in order before confronting Jessica. We went through all of our assets together. The house, our savings accounts, retirement funds, cars, everything. He helped me understand what I was entitled to and what a fair division would look like. He also suggested I open a separate bank account and start moving some money there, just my portion of our joint savings, to make sure I had access to funds during the divorce process. I followed his advice. I opened a new checking account at a different bank and transferred exactly half of our joint savings into it. I made copies of all our important financial documents, tax returns, mortgage papers, investment statements. I changed my direct deposit at work to go into the new account instead of our joint one. I was preparing for war, and I needed to make sure I had the resources to fight. On a Friday evening in late April, I decided it was time. Jessica had texted me earlier saying she would be home late, another meeting with Marcus and the executive team. Except I knew from the monitoring app that she was actually at the Marriott downtown, same hotel as before, room 412. The GPS location had been stationary there for 2 hours already. I packed a bag with some clothes and personal items. I took my laptop with all the evidence. I wrote out a timeline of events to keep myself focused during the confrontation. And then I drove to the Marriott, parked in the garage, and walked into that hotel lobby for the second time, but with a very different purpose than my first visit. I took the elevator to the 4th floor. My hands were shaking as I walked down the hallway looking for room 412. When I found it, I stood outside that door for a full minute, listening. I could hear voices inside, muffled but definitely there. A woman laughing. Jessica laughing. With him. I knocked on the door. 3 sharp knocks. The voices inside went silent immediately. I knocked again, harder this time. Then I heard footsteps approaching the door and Jessica's voice calling out asking who it was. I didn't answer. I just knocked again. There was a long pause, some whispered conversation I couldn't make out, and then the door opened just a crack. Jessica's face appeared in the gap, and when she saw me standing there, the color drained from her face completely. Her eyes went wide, her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She said my name like a question, like she couldn't believe I was actually standing there. I pushed the door open wider and walked past her into the room. Marcus was there, sitting on the bed, shirt untucked, looking panicked. The room smelled like wine and perfume. There were 2 glasses on the nightstand, clothes scattered on the floor. Jessica started talking immediately, words tumbling out in a rush. She said it wasn't what it looked like, that they were just having a work meeting, that I was being crazy showing up like this. Her lies were so automatic, so practiced, that she couldn't even stop herself from telling them when I was literally standing in the hotel room, catching her red-handed. I pulled out my phone and held it up, showing her the screenshots of their text messages. I scrolled through them slowly, reading some of the more explicit ones out loud. Her face went from pale to red. She stopped talking mid-sentence. Marcus stood up from the bed and started saying something about how they could all talk about this like adults, but I cut him off. I told Marcus he should call his wife right now and tell her where he was, or I would do it for him. I had already looked up his home address and phone number from the company directory online. I had his wife's name, Jennifer, and her Facebook profile pulled up on my phone ready to send her a message with all the evidence. Marcus went even more pale than Jessica. He started begging me not to do that, saying we could work this out, that he would end things with Jessica immediately. Jessica finally found her voice again and started getting defensive. She said I had no right to track her phone or read her messages. She accused me of being controlling and paranoid. She said if I hadn't been such a boring husband who didn't support her career ambitions, she wouldn't have needed to find someone who understood her. She actually tried to make this my fault, standing there in a hotel room with her lover, blaming me for her decision to cheat. I stayed calm. I told her I had already filed for divorce. The papers would be served to her on Monday morning. I had evidence of everything, hundreds of messages and location data and hotel receipts, and I would be sharing all of it with the divorce court. I also planned to share it with her company's human resources department, since she and Marcus were violating the company's policy against romantic relationships between supervisors and subordinates. That's when Jessica's attitude completely changed. She went from defensive to desperate in seconds. She started crying, saying she made a mistake, that she still loved me, that we could go to counseling and work through this. She grabbed my arm and begged me not to tell her company, saying it would ruin her career. Marcus was also panicking now, realizing that his marriage and his job were both about to explode. Listening to both of them panic at the same time felt surreal. A few weeks earlier, I would have done anything to save my marriage. In that hotel room, watching my half-naked wife and her boss beg me not to ruin their lives, something inside me finally snapped in a different way. Not angry, not hysterical, just done. I told Jessica to let go of my arm. She did. I said I wasn't there to fight or scream. I was there to draw a line. I told her I had spent weeks watching their messages, reading every disgusting thing they texted, tracking every time she left our house to sneak into a hotel with him. I said that while she was telling me she was too tired for sex, she had enough energy to meet Marcus at lunchtime, and then again after work. I said she had already ruined our marriage. I was just making sure she didn't walk away from it like the victim. Marcus tried to jump in again, saying they had already decided to end the affair, that tonight was just one last conversation to get closure. I laughed. I told him I had screenshots from just that afternoon where he texted her about what he wanted to do to her in the shower. He shut up pretty fast after that. He sat on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands, like he finally understood this wasn't going away. Jessica's crying turned angry again. She said I was being dramatic, that everyone cheats at some point, that it didn't have to mean the end of our marriage. She actually said, it was just sex most of the time. Derek, it didn't mean anything. That line will be burned into my memory forever. Just sex. Like that made any of it better. I told her I wasn't ending the marriage because of the sex. I was ending it because of the months of lying, gaslighting, and manipulation. The way she made me question my own sanity whenever I noticed something off. The way she rolled her eyes when I said I was worried about us. The way she turned me into the crazy, insecure husband in her head so she could feel better about betraying me. I picked up my bag, told her she would get the divorce paperwork on Monday, and that her access to our joint accounts was already limited to her half of what was left. I said I'd be staying at Ryan's place for a while. She followed me into the hallway, still crying, still alternately begging and blaming. I didn't say another word. I just walked away and let the door close behind me. The elevator ride down felt like the longest and shortest ride of my life. When the doors opened into the lobby, I stepped out into the quiet hotel and realized my hands had stopped shaking. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt strangely calm. Hurt, yes. Betrayed, absolutely. But also free, like the ground was finally solid under my feet, even if it hurt to stand on it. That night, I showed up at Ryan's apartment with my bag and a face that probably said everything before I spoke. He opened the door, took one look at me, and just said, "So you found something?" I nodded. Inside, over a couple of beers, I told him everything. The tracking app, the hotel receipts, the messages, the confrontation. He listened without interrupting much, just shaking his head in disbelief every so often. When I was done, he said something that really stuck with me. He said, "Man, she didn't just cheat on you. She built a whole separate life and tried to leave you in the dark. You're not crazy. You're just done being lied to." Hearing someone else say that out loud helped more than I expected. It gave me permission to stop blaming myself. The next few weeks were rough. Jessica did not take the divorce news quietly. At first, she went into damage control mode. She texted me long paragraphs about how she was willing to cut off Marcus completely, quit her job, go to therapy, whatever it took. She said she had been going through a phase and didn't realize how much she would lose. Every message was full of I and me. Not once did she really acknowledge the pain she caused. When I didn't respond, she shifted tactics. She started telling mutual friends that I had abandoned her because I couldn't handle her career success. One of her close friends, Amanda, called me to hear my side. I sent Amanda a handful of screenshots. 10 minutes later, she texted back saying she was sorry, she had no idea, and that Jessica had told her it was just harmless flirting with a coworker. That lie fell apart fast. Jessica's parents got involved too. They called me, upset, saying I was overreacting and that marriages could survive infidelity if both people worked at it. I asked them how they would feel if they woke up tomorrow and found out one of them had been cheating for months, lying every day, and then tried to blame them for not being exciting enough. Her mom went quiet. Her dad muttered something about kids these days and ended the call. On the legal side, things moved forward. Robert filed everything and served Jessica at work. I didn't ask for alimony. We both made similar incomes. I just wanted a fair split of assets and for the court to acknowledge her affair in the record. Robert also drafted a very professional, very clear letter addressed to her company's HR department, outlining the affair between her and Marcus and attaching some of the less explicit, but still obviously inappropriate, messages. I sent that packet to HR using certified mail. I didn't do it out of spite, even though part of me definitely enjoyed the idea of them facing consequences. I did it because Marcus had power over Jessica at work, and their secret relationship put her career and other employees at risk. If their roles were reversed, and some male boss was secretly sleeping with a female subordinate and promoting her over others, everyone would agree it was a problem. About a week later, Jessica showed up at my friend Ryan's apartment building. She texted me from the parking lot saying she just wanted to talk. I agreed to meet her outside, mostly because I didn't want her to start banging on his door and causing a scene. She looked rough, eyes red from crying, hair a mess, still wearing her work clothes, but with her blouse wrinkled like she'd been tugging at it all day. She walked up to me and said, "You told HR." "No hello, no how are you. Just straight to that." I said yes, I did, and I stood by it. She said Marcus had been suspended pending an investigation, and she had been moved off her team temporarily. She called it humiliating and said I was destroying her career out of revenge. I reminded her that she had destroyed our marriage out of selfishness. I said I wasn't responsible for the consequences of her choices. I had just stopped covering for them. Then she dropped another bomb. She said Marcus' wife had found out everything, including the hotel receipts and the messages I'd shared. The wife had apparently confronted Marcus and then called Jessica, calling her every name in the book and threatening to show up at the office. Jessica tried to make herself the victim in that story too, saying the wife was crazy and overreacting. I told her very calmly that I was done being her emotional punching bag. I told her I hoped she would one day understand how deeply she had hurt not just me, but also an entire other family. 2 kids who were going to watch their parents fight because of her and Marcus. I said that whatever happened to her job, her reputation, her social circle, was on her. Over the next month, everything crumbled for her. Word got around the office faster than HR could contain it. People talk, and a married director sleeping with her married boss is juicy gossip. Jessica went from being the golden girl of her department to the cautionary tale. Some coworkers stopped talking to her entirely. Others were polite but distant. Her team refused to have one-on-one meetings with her without someone else present, worried anything they did could get twisted. Eventually, HR concluded their investigation. Marcus was fired for violating company policy and creating a hostile work environment. Jessica was demoted, moved to a different department with a lower title and a pay cut. She kept her job, but all the promotions she had chased so hard were gone. The ladder she had climbed using late nights with her boss had basically been kicked out from under her. Meanwhile, the divorce moved forward. We sold the house. I got my fair share of the equity. I kept one of the dogs, she kept the other. Splitting the dogs hurt more than splitting the furniture, but it is what it is. The court didn't punish her financially for cheating, but the record reflected the affair, which mattered to me. It was the truth, in black and white, not some vague, we grew apart story. Emotionally, those months were a roller coaster. Some days I woke up furious, replaying that hotel scene in my head, imagining all the nights she texted him while lying next to me. Other days I felt numb, like I had run out of feelings and was just going through the motions. I started seeing a therapist, which helped more than I expected. Talking to someone who wasn't emotionally involved, who could point out patterns and help me unpack the guilt I didn't even realize I was carrying, was huge. One thing the therapist said stood out. She said, "You're allowed to be angry, but don't let her live rent-free in your head forever. The best revenge, beyond the legal stuff, is building a life where she doesn't matter." That became kind of my guiding thought. Yes, she faced consequences. She lost her affair partner, her fancy title, a lot of friends. But I didn't want my whole future to be about what she did. Slowly, I started to build something new. I reconnected with hobbies I had dropped because Jessica thought they were a waste of time, like playing pickup basketball on weekends and working on my old car in the garage. I spent more time with friends without having to check Jessica's schedule. I cooked what I wanted, watched what I wanted, went where I wanted without worrying if my plans fit into her constant work emergencies. Every once in a while, a mutual friend would mention something about her. How she complained that everyone at work judged her. How she said I had turned everyone against her by telling the truth. How Marcus tried to reach out to her again after his wife kicked him out, and she turned him down because he was too much drama now. The irony of that still makes me shake my head. The last time we saw each other in person was at the final divorce hearing. It was quick. Papers signed, judge confirmed the division of assets, and that was it. As we walked out of the courthouse, she asked if we could talk for a minute. I agreed, mostly for closure. She said, "I really did love you, you know." I told her I believed she loved the version of me that didn't call her out, the version that kept trusting her no matter how weird things got. I said love without respect and honesty isn't really love, it's just convenience. She didn't have much to say to that. Then she asked if there was any chance, maybe in the future, that we could try again. I almost laughed, but I didn't. I just said no. I told her I hoped she learned something from all of this, because if she didn't, she would just repeat the same pattern with someone else. And then I walked away. Now, months later, I'm not going to pretend everything is perfect. Some nights I still wake up thinking I heard her phone buzzing, like my brain is stuck in that old loop. Sometimes I see a woman with similar hair in a store, and my stomach drops for a second. Healing is not a straight line. but I can honestly say I'm better off without her. Want to hear more stories like this? Subscribe. If anyone listening is going through something similar, here's what I've learned. First, trust your gut. If something feels off for a long time, you're not crazy. Second, get proof and get legal advice before you confront. Emotions are high, and you need to protect yourself. Third, understand that cheating is not about you not being enough. It's about the cheater's lack of integrity and courage. And finally, as satisfying as karma can be, the real justice is getting your life back and building something better without the person who broke you.